Unfortunately for you, it is Jim, and today we're going to be talking about one of the best PlayStation exclusives of all time. And no, I'm not talking about Knack or Crash Bandicoot. I'm talking about Bloodborne, baby. The best game of 2015. Get the f*** out of the way, Witcher. That's right, I said it. But despite being one of the greatest gifts to this god-forsaken earth, the game assuredly has its flaws, which I will go over today. First and foremost, you can't live off of it. That's just a damn shame. On a real note, Bloodborne not only fulfilled expectations, it exceeded them. From the atmospheric tones of when you first step into Yharnam to the visceral combat of fighting beasts and other worldly horrors, anyone who picks up the game and sees it through completion will more than likely have a positive opinion of their experience, so long as they don't give up from all the salt of dying along the way, which it will happen. The single player is, without a doubt, a masterpiece. However, I'm not going to be talking about that aspect of the game, which is weird to say because that quote-unquote aspect of the game is 90% of it. From the main menu to the credits screen, you will more than likely not encounter any of the issues that I'm going to be talking about today. The moment you press play online is the moment that these issues become a reality in your Bloodborne experience. If you remember my video on the aquamarine dagger, some of that anger surfaced, just a little bit, but here is where I'm really going to bring those flaws into the light. These flaws don't make the game bad or unplayable, not in any way, but they are flaws all the same. You can't ignore them nor fix them. They're simply there and you have to deal with them. So without any further ado, the following is the 5 most important flaws from Bloodborne's multiplayer. Let's start with number 1, because we like chronological order here. The bell system. Bloodborne offers co-op and PvP invasions, similar to how Dark Souls does co-op and PvP invasions. What's different between Bloodborne and Dark Souls, however, is the method in which you summon people into your world. Whereas Dark Souls use soapstones that place a bright visible sign on the ground for you to see, Bloodborne uses a bell system. Using these bells is proximity based, so if a hunter used a summoning bell, it would open up their world to try to find small resonant bells in their area. Not the entire zone, but like in their immediate area. The size isn't as big as you might think it is. An immediate downside of this system is that summoners don't necessarily have a choice who they can summon in. With soapstones, you can see their name and what they look like before accepting their help. In Bloodborne, you get what's ever put on your plate. That is, if you even connect to your help in the first place. The inconsistency of the bell's proximity system is sometimes so bad. Summoning can take as short as 30 seconds to as long as 5 minutes if you're that unlucky. It may require you to restart your game on both ends and for you trying different combinations of ringing the bells at different times. The unnecessary complexity of the bells eventually led to a player workaround that kinda helped the problem. The most success players have is when the help rings their small resonant bells first, before the summoner were to ring their bell. Honestly, it shouldn't be this hard to play with my friends game! And also, when you ring that summoning bell and get a small resonant bell to chime with yours, another bell in your world starts to ring, whether you want it to or not. It's a bell that's rung by none other than the second flaw of Bloodborne's multiplayer, the bell-ringing women. These bell-ringing women are enemies that open your world to invasions. What makes them unique is that they only spawn in 2 ways. The first is when a host has successfully summoned someone using the summoning bell. The second is when a player uses the sinister bell. When you ring the sinister bell and look for invasions, you also have the risk of opening up your own world to be invaded as well. Bell-ringing women also automatically spawn in the nightmare areas of the game. The thing about that is, there are only 2 nightmare areas, Nightmare Frontier and Nightmare of Mensis. But only one area, Mensis, is mandatory for players to go through in order to beat the game. The Frontier is completely optional and skippable. And let's not forget that once the host finds the bell-ringing woman and kills her, the host is no longer in danger of being invaded unless the area itself is reset by the host dying or by them teleporting to the hunter's dream and teleporting back into the world. So again, back from the top, say you're an invader looking for someone to invade. if you're not in a nightmare zone, the only people you're going to invade are either other invaders that haven't had their bosses killed, or hosts with help already in their world. On paper, this seems like an alright idea. Players who want to fight are going to find other players who want to fight. Likewise, the host with phantoms is now under more danger than the host originally was when they were just going it solo. But again, if you beat the area's boss, you can no longer be invaded. If invaders want to maximize their odds of fighting somebody, regardless if they're the ones invading or not, they would have to keep a lot of bosses alive in order to do this. And let's say that you do find a boss to invade. Odds are you will typically be outnumbered in either a 2v1 or even a 3v1 situation. The only surefire way of finding a wide range of players, both other invaders, solo hosts, and host with phantoms, is to go to the nightmare areas. Perhaps the one area you will assuredly invade someone to this day, September of 2017, is in the Mensis zone. But this was still a problem 2 years ago when the game came out. This entire system is severely limiting. In a game with dozens of areas to explore and discover, only 3 have mandatory bell-ringing women in them. Oh, and don't forget about the fact that the bell ringing system is proximity based. If you're trying to use either the small resonant bell for co-op or the sinister bell for invasions, you have to constantly be on the move to find a host that may or may not be in your direct area. Bells don't search the entire zone like the Dark Souls games previous. When you popped a red eye orb in those games, the game would spawn you according to the position of the host. It searched the entire zone that you were applicable in. When you use the Sinister Bell or Small Resonant Bell, the game just plucks you from the exact spot that you were in your own world, giving you no true indication where the host is once you spawned, but that's where the proximity comes in. If you're really close to the host and then you spawn in, then of course the host should be right there. This bell ringing method, while an interesting concept, has these detrimental points to it that makes it hard to co-op with and even harder to invade with. But once you are, for sure, in another host's world or when someone's invaded you, the next flaw of Bloodborne's multiplayer begins to surface. The netcode. You most certainly have heard this term thrown around many different times in video games. It's often used as a blanket term to describe every little issue with playing online games, but that's not necessarily true. The real definition is this. It's the application code that handles how data and instructions are passed from computer to computer, console to console during a multiplayer game, or in Bloodborne's case, a multiplayer interaction. Netcode isn't lag or latency, but it can either smooth it over or make it worse. See, lag is typically when your Wi-Fi is being terrible, much like mine. Let me be a lesson, kids, that you have to play unwired. But even if you play on a wired connection, the networks of you and the person you're connected to could still have a bad time. Take, for example, someone in Canada playing online against someone in Asia. Not even their 100 down and 50 up connections can cover for that worldwide distance. Scott Jund, aka DamnoHTML, did a perfect video on Bloodborne's netcode, which I'll show a little bit of here.
Say player 1 swings and player 2, who appears to be in range for a hit on player 1 screen, does not roll or attempt to dodge the attack. The hit connects on player 1 screen, and then that data is transferred over to player 2's computer. On player 2's computer, it checks whether or not he is currently in iframes, and if not, it checks again if he is in range of player 1 on his own screen. If both conditions are met, with player 2 being in range of the swing on not only player 1's screen but his own as well, then damage is applied and you see the stagger and the number pop up.
To make a long story short, it takes more frames for your hit to go through in Bloodborne. And first off, this makes the game feel like it's laggy even when you and the other player may have the best connections the two of you could possibly have. But wait, you can bet that you're going to come across a Wi-Fi warrior, or 2, or 100. This is a PlayStation exclusive after all. To see a console hooked up with a LAN cable is a blessing, but don't assume that it's the rule. So now that you add the whipped cream that is lag onto that sloppy netcode base, the game feels like it's going too quick for itself sometimes. See, Bloodborne is supposed to be a fast game. That's in the very nature of its mechanics. That's why the trick weapons work so well, and why the hunters dodge on a dime. It may look like a mess sometimes, but other times it may resemble something more like a dance. Though coated in blood, it's a dance all the same. How does a netcode system like this do nothing but hinder such fast-paced engagements if the game is taking so much time to even register that you've hit the other guy in the first place? You'll trade mutual blows at moments where your hit should have gone through first. You'll feel slow and your attacks sluggish, while your opponents seem to know all the latest Dragon Ball Z techniques. What cements that helpless feeling is the likely fact that you may be killed in 4, 3, or even 2 hits if the other player has the appropriate blood gems. And oh, that reminds me, the 4th flaw of Bloodborne's multiplayer: Blood Gems and TTK. Now, TTK stands for time to kill. With the best blood gems in the game on your weapon, it really doesn't take you that long to kill somebody. Now, there's a lot to unpack for blood gems. The reasoning for their existence is that you could completely customize your trick weapons to your own style of play. You could boost specifically thrust damage on weapons that clearly only use thrust attacks, or you could infuse rally gems to get more health back when you attacked after being hit, or you could use gems that benefited a hyper build so you could potentially one-shot bosses. And yes, that's possible. While I have no quarrels with the blood gem concept, problems start to arise when you account for a player's HP and physical defense. When you fight somebody in this game, at the meta level at least, you are going to get capped in 4 hits or less. I guarantee it. Now, what's to blame here? If you expect your character to have 50 vitality and you equipped the clockwise metamorphosis runes like the powerful 3 and 2, you will come out with 1897 HP. If you leveled up to, say, blood level 120 and put on the standard hunter armor set, you will have 236 inherent physical damage and 234 physical reduction damage. Now, what's with these two numbers? Don't worry, it's going to get a little bit mathy up in here, so nerds, pay attention. There's an equation for defense that went something like this. If the AR of your weapon is greater than or equal to your opponent's defense, it's the AR times 0.9 minus half of that physical defense number. Then there's the clothing defense, that's a percentage reduction afterwards. Every 10 points equals 1% damage reduction. If you have runes that add a percentage defense, those will be added onto the clothing percentage. Not to mention that clothing defense is stacked multiplicatively and not additively. Basically what that means is that you can choose whatever fashion you want and not suffer noticeable damage reduction just for wanting to look good. As long as you're wearing something, of course. Shout out to SLJM on Reddit for compiling this information into a text post. JM. I also encourage you to check out Solid Cake's videos on damage reduction here on YouTube. They both do a perfect job on explaining in greater detail what these defense numbers do. However, none of this math jargon means anything if the AR of your weapon reaches insane numbers, which it can. With 3 high-level blood gems, the highest you can go, say physical attack up 27.2%, and you equip them onto an optimized build, you can have an upwards of 600 AR on a weapon like the Saw Spear. So after you calculate your defense equations, the Saw Spear is still going to hurt. Not to mention that certain moves like transformation attacks have multipliers that add to the total damage that's going to be done, and at the end of the day, you will still be able to count the number of hits it takes to kill you on one hand. So is the fault in our defenses? Were we not given enough? Or is it because the game just gives us too much AR to work with? I don't have the answer to these questions. What I do know though, is that in order to compete with the rest of the no-lifers who just so happen to have these high-level blood gems, you need to obtain those exact same gems to keep up. And where do you go to get them? This leads us to the 5th and final flaw of Bloodborne's multiplayer: the Chalice dungeon grind. Now, I don't want to start off on the wrong foot here. I'm not going to talk about the lore of the dungeons, nor do I want to talk about the quality of the bosses therein. There's some pretty good bosses in there, for sure. Not going to touch that part. I do, on the other hand, want to talk about the quantity of bosses and chalices that you have to go through in order just to get one specific root chalice that you need in order to just start even farming to get the high-end blood gems in the first place. Okay, so when you first make a character, you just want to play through the game with them. You know, that's fine. There are 17 bosses in total throughout the entire game. Depending on which ending you want to get, you could take up to 2 away. Okay, so now 15. Let's just say 15 because you don't want to beat the final boss or else you get put into New Game Plus. That's fine. 15 bosses is manageable, right? Okay, now let's add the DLC onto it. You need the DLC. The DLC is great. That's 5 more bosses. We're at 20 now. 20 sounds fine. It's still fine, right? That's the perfect amount to deal with when you're making a build of some kind. Not when you want high-level blood gems! In order to get the best blood gems you can possibly obtain, you need to go through every chalice and fight the bosses that come along with them. So again, from the top, say you want the best physical attack gems there are. Alright, that's simple. First you gotta do the Themaru chalice, you know, the one you get from the Bloodstarved Beast. 3 bosses in there. Alright. Next, the Central Theramu chalice. That's 3 more. Next, the Lower Theramu chalice. Oh, that's 4 more. Whoa, getting crazy on me now, game. We are now at 30 bosses. You following me? Now in the order of the Theramu chalices, the next one is the Defiled chalice, but we can't go there just yet. Why? We need some ingredient known as the Bastard of Loran, 2 of them. Speaking of little bastards, there's this other chalice, the Ailing Loran. Once you go through that, that's 3 more bosses. Now you got the materials you need, you can now go through the Defiled chalice. The Defiled chalice has 3 more bosses. And guess what? Your health is halved the entire time while you go through it. 'Cause you, this is Bloodborne, son. Get good. Now we're at the final one, the Great Theramu chalice. 3 more bosses and 1 gold trophy later, you get the Great Theramu root chalice. Put this password in and slam bam, thank you ma'am. Your farming can finally begin. But wait, that's just for the radial blood gems with physical attack up. Some weapons have triangles and waning slots, so in order to get those, they're in other chalices, like the Lower Loran and the Great Iz, which have more bosses. Which number at we now? 39? You have to go through 39 plus bosses now. The chalice dungeons effectively raise your boss count 2 times. There's no getting around it. Now this is for only those people who want to make different characters, different builds, different levels. You're stuck in here. But if you're going through the game with 1 character, 1 build the entire time just leveling up, this is fine. It adds more content to the game and it's all very appropriate. It adds more playtime for you. And some of you more informed viewers will say that you don't necessarily need the 27.2% gems and the chalices, and that you can possibly settle for the blood gems given in the DLC that drop from the Winter Lanterns. And I will admit those physical attack gems can drop up to 22.3%. The difference between a Saw Spear on 3 DLC blood gems compared to 3 Chalice blood gems is nearly 70 AR. Going through 20 extra bosses just for a sub 80 AR increase may sound like a lot of hoopla, but it really is something. You decimate people in the blink of an eye. Before we had the DLC, the highest story blood gems you can get were 19.8%. Between that and the Chalice gems, that's nearly 100 AR increase. That's the deciding factor between dying in 4 hits and dying in 2. It's insane. Another flaw that's a brief honorable mention: you can't respec in this game, or respecialize, whatever word you choose to use. Once you make 1 build, you can't simply change to another one. So if you want to stick to a certain meta, be it 100, 120, 150, or even lower than that, or whatever you want to be, you have to make a brand new character and then go through this entire slog again. Wonderful. So in conclusion, add this frustrating grind onto a slow netcode, an inconsistent bell system, a limited number of active multiplayer areas, and most importantly, the fact that you will die quicker than you can say, "You've killed me!" and you get Bloodborne's multiplayer. This all is not to say that Bloodborne's multiplayer is completely broken. On the contrary, when Bloodborne's multiplayer works, it's one of the greatest online experiences one can even have in a game. It's these undeniable road bumps along the way that ended up muddying the waters. They ended up turning many dedicated Souls players away from it. Bloodborne's PvP is effectively a joke now, a meme. No one likes to talk about it or even look in its direction. But I think it's more than that. See, a few saw potential in it. Several months ago, there was a small push for a gemless fight club. The vigor and motivation for the movement was relatively short-lived, but the sentiment remained. The idea was that every combatant stayed at a low blood level, say 70, and they all entered the Fight Club Chalice dungeon with no blood gems on. Save for the arcane users, they could have one single blood gem to change their weapon to their respective elemental damage of choice, but only at a certain percentage. This very idea just sounds so beautiful to me. Longer fights, more calculated attacks, and ultimately everyone learned how to use their combos more efficiently. How to chain combos, how to bait into punishes. Sure, the netcode would still be there, but now you wouldn't be punished with losing half your health because of it. I don't know if this kind of fight club will ever surface again, but the very concept came from a pure place in the heart. Players wanted to keep enjoying the game, so they found a way to keep playing it. And ultimately, that's the great thing about games like Bloodborne and Dark Souls. You can play it however you wish. It's all valid. Rest assured, the way you play might not be the most effective or meta way, but it is your way. And that's about it for me. If you learned something new today, or you enjoyed watching this video, do whatever you want to do. Comment with your thoughts, and let's begin a discussion. I do try to read every comment. Like the video if you do genuinely like it or wish to show your support. And subscribe if you somehow feel so inclined to want more of my trash. Regardless, thank you for watching this video. I greatly appreciate it. I'll leave off today with another reminder that life is incredibly short. Days pass by, then weeks, months, years. The world's starting to become a more hectic place than it has been before. Be sure to tell the ones you care about that you love and appreciate them. But also, find a direction in your life that you're confident in. Find people to help build you up along the way. The road is rocky and filled with forks at every step. It may seem daunting and may even appear impossible at times, but you still have to go on. Why? Because if you're still breathing, you're still carrying a message in your lungs. What will your message be? For now, have a great day and have a good night, and take care of yourselves. See ya.
We ain't dead yet.